Good morning, everybody. I hope yesterday we went through the YouTube. Okay, so the first chapter which I started, that is about the research introduction. So where we discussed about the meaning of the research and what are the objectives have to be objectives of the research, or what are the research objectives have to be kept in the mind, and what will be the motivation for the research. Okay, that is why to carry out research, what is the motive behind that, and the various types of research which are there in the society, that all we discussed, and also the significance of the research or the importance of the research, that also we have discussed. And also I discussed about the difference between research methods and research methodology. Okay, so with this, now I continue the chapter of the research introduction. Okay, so in this today we'll discuss in detail about the research process. Okay, the research process, it is nothing but it consists of series of steps that are necessary to carry out the research, and they are in the sequential form, one after the other step have to be followed, okay, to meet the objectives of the research. So that is nothing but research process. Okay, so what is the first step in the research process? That is formulating the research problem. That is the first step in the research process. The second, the literature survey. That is the second step in the research process. Third, develop the hypothesis. That is the third step in the research. And fourth step, preparation of the research design. Preparation of the research design. The fifth step is determining the sample design. Determining the sample design. Sixth, collection of the data. Seventh, execution of the process. Eighth, analysis of the data. Ninth, hypothesis testing. And the 10th, generalization and interpretation of the results. And 11th, preparation of the report or the presentation of the results. That is the last step. So all these steps have to be adopted in the research process. Okay, so now we discuss the formulation of the research problem. Okay, how to arrive the research problem. It is one of the challenging job in the research. So during our research studies, when I had been for my research to the PhD College of Technology, Coimbatore. So to identify the problem, we have nearly spent 6 months, literally, to identify the research problem. Okay, so the identification of the research problem is very important and is the very first step in the research. Okay, so then how to identify the research problem? Okay, so in the beginning we must decide in which area we are interested. So everybody has got in our own, we have our own expertise or we have our own experience in certain limited domains. For example, so take my example. I was interested in, and I was teaching many years, the supply chain management. And also it was my interested domain of my research. So I decided, yes, if anything to be done, I want to do it in supply chain management. Subject. It is a domain. And it is the need of the society, need of the industry. So I got an interest to pursue my research. I was not knowing the problem, just they identified the domain. That is the first. Okay. So then, once you identify the domain, okay, so we need to contact the people in and around. I went to IIT. I met some industrial engineering professors there. And also my guide, who was also experienced in supply chain optimization. And also I went to Amrita School of Engineering at Timarai, Tamil Nadu. And also I went to Anantapur, JNT University to meet some of the professors in that domain. And also I went to BUB College of Engineering, where my colleagues were there. They were working on artificial intelligence. So like that, we met so many experienced people in my domain. I contacted them and we asked them how to define our research problem. Is there any scope in the supply chain issue? Can we work on this, something like optimization? And also I was interested in using artificial intelligence. So like this, we discussed with many people and we arrived. Okay. A broad area of the research has been defined. Okay. So that is nothing but, with respect to me, I defined a supply chain network optimization using artificial intelligence. It's a broad area. It's a broad problem which I have been identified. Okay, like this, we need to identify the research problem in our interested domain. Some issues, some problem has to be taken for the research. That is the first episode. The second step, we need to carry out literature review. Okay, it's one of the important chapter in the research. Okay, we spent nearly 4 to 5 months in the literature review. That is nothing but collection of the international published research papers from various publishers, international publishers, okay, well-known publishers like Emerald, Elsewhere, Taylor and Francis, IndoScience, Spingerlink. They are the research journal publishers. So related to my domain, I downloaded nearly 150 papers related to my research area. And also the collection of the paper don't so easily you'll get all the papers on the net. So I went to IIT Madras, I went to ISC, and in our college, and also in PhD technology, and also I got some paper from IIT Kharagpur. So like this, we need to get contact and get the papers for our research. And we need to read the paper, okay, to enhance the knowledge around the domain which we have selected. The knowledge increases, and we'll come to know that what are the people have been used in their tools have been used in their research, how they have carried out the research, and we'll come to know that how to write the papers. So the English improves, writing skill improves, knowledge comes, we understand newer tools by the researchers which have been used. So like this, we have got a lot of benefits by going through the literature review. And also we'll come up with what is the literature gap, what not has been done, which will be the scope to carry out our research. Okay? At the end of the literature review, we need to identify the literature gap. Literature gap. Then we need to decide a research problem in detail, clearly. In the beginning, the first step, the broad area of research problem, and after literature review, we need to narrow down the problem, research a detailed, accurate research specific problem or the issue in the domain, research domain we need to define. Okay. Then after the literature review, okay, we need to develop the working hypothesis. Working hypothesis, that is in terms of working hypothesis have to be defined. Working hypothesis is tentative assumption made in order to draw out and test the logical and empirical consequences in the research. Okay, and also we need to define our research objectives. The research objectives based on the research problem should be very clear. Okay, the research problem and research objectives are the foundations of the research. Okay, the research which we carry out, it lies on the objectives and the problem which you defined. Okay, if we have the weak problem, weak objectives, definitely one or the other day our research collapse. Okay, so be careful of defining the research problem and research objectives, and immediately the fourth step, that is research design, or it is called as the research methodology. You can call it as a research methodology or the research design. Okay, it tells you the systematic sequence of steps to be followed one after the other. Okay, with respect to the objectives of the research, what resources are required, what facilities are required, in the sense what laboratory facilities are required, okay, and how much cost is involved in the procurement of materials or procurement of the equipments if they are not available in the laboratories, and also how much time it consumes, how much cost it involves. So all about the resources required for our research has to be well planned, okay, in the research design, as well as the time constraint, timeline, how much time is required, how much cost is required, how many people are required. So all these things, okay, the phase wise, the timeline, okay, we need to decide the research design. Okay, then fifth step, determination of the sampling design. So we have various types of sampling designs. We have a separate chapter for that. How to decide sample size for the research. That is nothing but the population, it's called as inverse. And any research not possible to carry out or collect the data or the information for the whole universe. We need to collect the samples from the universe, and we need to decide the sample size, and we need to gather the information. Then that sample output that represent the inverse. So we have the sampling ways. The first one is deliberate sampling, random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, quota sampling, cluster sampling, multi-stage sampling. So like this, various methods, various approaches of sampling being used for sampling design. So for a particular research, may not be all sampling types are being used. Depending upon our research, we need to identify one or two sampling designs and we need to perform the study. Once that is over, then collection of the data also plays an important, the data collection is important point. And how to collect data, what will be the format, what will be the tables, how many columns, how many factors, this is all going to be formulated in the sampling design. Okay, so based on that, we need to collect the data with the prescribed formats through observations. Okay, we can stand, say for example, I'm working on certain machines. Okay, we need to study some of the performance. So I need to collect the data from the machine by the observation, by using various equipments. Okay, like this, we need to observe and need to record the data. Then through the personal interviews, we need to ask the people, say for example, customer survey in the market. So we need to go to the market and personally, and we need to contact people personally there, and we need to ask them questions, and their feedback has to be collected. And through telephonic interviews, we can call and ask over a phone and collect the information. And mailing questionnaires, some set of questions have to be mailed and we have to ask them to supply the feedback. And through the schedules, we need to fix up the time and contact the people and get the survey. Then, so like this, various methods are the ways by which we can collect the data. Then execution of the project. Okay, so always before we start our research work, we have certain time. For every research, if you go regular research, we have 3 years of time for research. And if you have doing research part-time, you will be having 5 years of time. So this 5 years or 3 years of time has to be properly scheduled or planned on a bar chart. We need to split all these 10 steps of the research time-wise. How much time it will take to define a problem, how much time we take for literature review, how much time we take to define methodology, how much time we require for data collection, how much time is required for analysis, and how much time is required for thesis writing, how much time is required for publication of the paper. So like this, we need to define the chart, bar chart, or the Gantt chart we call it as, or it called as the research schedule. Are we adhered every 2 months or every 3 months? Are we adhered to our research plan? Are we adhered to our execution plan? Compare. If any gap, adjust. So like this, we need to execute our research as per our plan so that we complete our research work within well-defined time. So that is called the execution of the project. Then analysis of the data. So once the data is being collected, has to be properly analyzed, okay, and discussed with the other colleagues, professors, industry people, okay. So the data which has been collected in the form of tables, the output can be mimicked in terms of the graphs, okay, charts, and we need to interpret the charts, graphs, tables, and analyze the data. Then it's also most important for writing the conclusion of the research. Then hypothesis testing. Okay, the hypothesis which has been formulated, or if this is true, if this is that false. So that is called the hypothesis setting in the beginning of the research. So after collecting the data, we need to put all these data, and we need to test whether the hypothesis is true or whether the assumption is true, whether the assumption is false. That is called the hypothesis testing. Once it is being done, we need to interpret the results, okay, and we need to write down the conclusions, okay. Once we do all these steps, the last step is preparation of the thesis or the preparation of the report, okay. So it comprises of 4 broad areas. One is introduction, and next the summary of the findings, and the main report, and the conclusion. Okay, I'll take a separate class, how to prepare research report, stepwise, whether it was your MTech thesis report or your PhD dissertation report, or once after completion, if you join the industry, you are expected to write down a lot of reports for the projects. So how to write a report? What are the chapters to be included in the report? That all the things I'll be telling in detail in the next class. Okay? Then, so these are all the steps to be followed in the research process. Okay? Then, there are some criteria for the good research. When you call it as the research is good, okay? So the first one is that the purpose of the research should be clearly defined and common concept be used. So the research is good. The first step is that we need to define clearly the purpose of the research. There should be clarity. It should not be ambiguous. The second step is the research procedure used should be described in detail to permit other researcher to repeat the research. So the research methodology has to be systematically written. Should be systematically written. That is called as a good research. The procedural design of the research should be clearly planned. Clearly planned. Then, researcher should report and complete the frankness in the report. The analysis of the data should be sufficiently adequate. Okay, the data required for analysis should be sufficient. If the insufficient data if you collect, okay, that leads to flaws in the research. Okay, whether the required sufficient data has been collected or not, that also has to be seen. So it should be sufficient. Then it's called as a good research. So then conclusion should be confined to these justified by the research objectives. Okay, the objectives and conclusions should be same, should be matched. Then only our research is achieved. If the objectives of the research are different and your conclusions are different, then there is no match between objectives and the research. Okay, there should be match between objectives and the conclusion. Then that research is called as a good research. So this is how the good research can be classified. Broadly, the good research is systematic, and good research is logical, and good research is empirical, and good research is replicable. Okay, so these are the broadly these the good research should be covering these four things. One is systematic, it should be logical, and it should be empirical, and it should be replicable. Okay, so then there are some of the issues encountered by the researchers in India. The many researchers have got some issues with respect to research in India. What are those issues or the problems? The first one, the lack of scientific training in the methodology of research. So the many people don't know how to carry out the research because of the lack of training. Then second, there is a insufficient interaction between the universities, research universities. Okay, as I told you that, I went to IIT Kharagpur, I went to IIT Madras, I went to JNTU University of Hyderabad. So I had an interaction with the various people across the various universities. Okay, so this is lacking. This is lacking. Many people are in the India there will not be any collaborative research work. That's why we are facing some issues with the research. Then most of the business units in our country do not have confidence, in the institutes. That is, industry institute interactions in India is very poor. If you consider US, UK, Europe, so every university has got tie-up or MOU or research collaboration with industry. Industry will come to institute, institute will go to industry. So that is not there in India. Okay, the research studies overlapping one another are undertaken. So the same research could be done by many people, overlapping. Then there does not exist a conduct for researchers, code of conduct. So the code of conduct means there is standard procedure of adopting research. For example, plagiarism, copying, patents. So there are certain procedures for conduction of the research. That is not very serious in India. Okay, that is to be studied before carrying out the research. Research has got certain ethics and values that should be followed. Unethical research, that is nothing but copying of the other, that violates the code of conduct of the research. The most of the researchers in our country also have difficulty of adequate and timely sectorial assistance, including computational assistance. Okay, we have a lot of difficulties in computational, maybe the computational systems like big servers for big analytics. We have some limitations in the institutes or in the colleges. Okay, that's it. And also the library management and functioning of the satisfactory of at many places. So we don't find good libraries and we don't find good online informations, publications most of the libraries, they do not have subscribed to the many research journals because of the costly papers. So this has to be enhanced. The research has to be developer means we need to go for subscription of a lot of research journals in almost all domains of the engineering. Then there is also a problem of many of the our libraries are not able to get the copies of the old research papers. So like this we have many difficulties we are facing by the researchers in the India. Okay, so to develop our research in our country, we need to eradicate all these issues. Then we can develop good researchers in our country, researchers in our country. Okay, so the remaining things I will take it in the next class. Bye, take care.